Okay. And like I said, we're going to convert this to a PDF, so everybody will have the slide materials if they want in the way of an email. And so this is just a quick introduction. Thank you for joining us tonight. Next slide. I wanted to just include a quick intro here. And what we're going to discuss is a recap of the 2023 session, some discussions that have been online about a class action that the profession might consider, a veto campaign for Senate Bill 230 with the governor, what more you can do to help. And then I have some thoughts as a summary of the bill itself. Sometimes, there's some confusion about what's actually in the bill. And then our legislative plan for 2024. And then we're going to do some Q&A. And again, if people have questions along the way, they can feel free to put that in the chat and or raise a hand. Starting with a recap, I just wanted to touch on the things that have been done already and the things that are left to be done. And I think sometimes we felt like when Senate Bill 230 was adopted by the House, that's it. That's the end of the story. They won, we lost. We're stuck. But that's not the case. There's a full process that's going to come next, and that includes the governor has a deadline of June 30th to sign or veto the bill. If it's vetoed, there won't be any changes to the existing acupuncture titles. And if the bill passes, there will be some new definitions in Chapter 456, as well as the potential for a prohibition on acupuncture physician. It is not a foregone conclusion that the physician titling is going away. What FSOMA has been trying very hard to preserve is the most explicit use of that title that is protected. And so having it included in 456 in the bill that was being introduced would take our physician title protections outside of our own Practice Act and put it into the general occupations statutes that we all have to abide by anyway. But that's in 456. And so that would be in our highest good. That's the one that's most explicit. It conveys to all boards of medicine, all interested parties, that this is a protected title for acupuncturists. That's why we were fighting so hard for the inclusion under that bill. Now, the fact that we did not get that, if the bill passes, there's still other remedies for us that include getting a declaratory statement from the Board of Acupuncture, which is basically a position statement from them saying, look, when this new law goes into effect, what, if any, effect does it have on our use of professional titles? And the board can look at that and say, as far as we're concerned, there's no change at all. Or they may have some recommendation. Or the governor or the legislature may have some more input on this. And so there is more to be done specifically with the Board of Acupuncture. And then lastly, the final correction for the problems like these is that FSOMA will provide an update to Chapter 457 with modernization of that language under titles and definitions. And so when you look out in front of the list of things to do, there's several things here that provide us a remedy for not only improving our Practice Act, but solidifying definitions that provide for our preservation and continued use of professional titles. All right. This is when Galena was saying, when we move in unity and we operate in one voice, and we do things in the natural order in the way that they're supposed to be done. This is the route that you follow. We've worked very hard this year to make it very clear that obviously some changes to 457 are needed. That's been explained to us as well. And so it's not going to come as a surprise to the legislature that we're making decisions like that. And so it's good time for us to make these changes. Next slide, please. I included information tonight under the class action suit because I had an opportunity to speak with the principals who have organized this idea and shared that online. And we've had an opportunity to talk about the idea itself, potential impact for that, and why I think it's more likely that our best remedy, as I described on the previous page, and we'll look at it again, is going to be with the Board of Acupuncture and with doing our own work. We have to improve our statute to include the definitions that we want. And that's part of our legislative effort for next year. But it's important for everybody to understand, FSOMA is the State Association for Licensed Acupuncturists for whom there are members. There are lots of people in the profession in Florida that do not support, the state association. Maybe they have in the past or they will in the future, but they don't right now. And so when FSOMA provides news and updates and advice and whatnot, we're largely speaking to the membership, but to the profession at large, to the extent that they want to, take our advice. We've had a lot of challenges over the years, and the association continues to work really in the highest good that we can for the profession, using those strategies that are most accepted in terms of lobbying, garnering support, and following the rule of law and doing the things that we need to do to try to move the profession forward and also protect it. But it's important to understand that if individual acupuncturists join in a class action that's actually filed against the governor, it's one thing to talk about it, it's one thing to ponder about it, it's another thing to investigate about it, but to actually file a lawsuit against the state of Florida or its executive branch, meaning Governor DeSantis, or any agency or department of, then the full weight, trust me, of the state attorney general's office will come to support their defense. Whether the legislature's right or wrong, whether the governor's right or wrong, or whether or not the department's right or wrong, they're going to tackle it, with their full effort behind them. And the class action is going to have to prove that the state, the governor, or an agency has actually done something illegal. And one of the challenges to that is that the legislature is empowered to change or draft new legislation. They're empowered to do that by the Constitution of the state of Florida. And the governor is empowered to either veto it or sign those bills into law. And that's all that's going on here. There's nothing new to see. Legislature thinks they have a new bright idea that they want to create new legislation for. They have an opportunity to do that. If the governor agrees with it, he'll sign it. If he disagrees with it, he vetoes it. But there's nothing illegal or improper about how government functions. And for us to form a class, and I say that us, I mean the profession or individuals from the profession to form a class, they're going to have to prove that the government did something wrong here. And it's a very high standard, because the legislature and the governor are empowered to do the things that they're doing. Just because we don't like it doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that we have to find a remedy to work within the system to, move this to a place where we're more comfortable. And we're more comfortable if our titles are protected, if there's other things in our scope that we want to see improved, that we have a chance to do that. And so in the end, there is no winning in this type of a case. It just creates new adversaries for the profession. What I'm saying is that even if under some freakish example, you find a judge that agrees with you that yes, you can form a class, and yes, there was wrongdoing on behalf of the government, and yes, they're going to tear down this rule and all of this stuff, it still means that we have to go back and make the changes to 457 anyway. And in the meantime, we've just made a lot of adversaries that it's going to make it more difficult for us to do the things we want. For example, there will be no future legislative support for the profession if we start tackling branches of government and pointing fingers at them legally. Okay, the Board of Acupuncture is part of the executive branch, and the governor is responsible for appointing people to the Board of Acupuncture. And right now, the board has been, pretty effectively protecting the public and serving the needs of the profession for many, many years without a lot of outside interference from the Department of Health, the executive branch, the Board of Medicine, the Board of Pharmacy, and other agencies and departments that have influence over healthcare regulation. And last, I just say, poking this bear and proceeding this way can only further the loss of privileges and autonomy for us. And so this is why I think it's important that we stick to the agenda of things that we discussed earlier in terms of working with the Board of Acupuncture for clarification on the rule, and for working on taking care of our own house. 457 needs to be updated, and that's what we need to do. So that needs to be our focus. Okay. I'm grateful for everybody who's provided me input, given me an opportunity to talk to them about this. But, you know, after a lot of careful consideration, this is my best advice for those that are talking about it. Okay. Next slide. So we looked at this before, and I just want to reiterate that the focus for 2023 and 2024 is the action plan focuses on the deficits and remedies that we need to work on to protect our own statute. Okay. In the meantime, over the next 4 weeks or so, we're looking at the governor's deadline. How is he going to handle Senate Bill 230? We're going to work with the Board of Acupuncture with a declaratory statement as soon as possible to get their input on how we can continue to use the titles, designations, and abbreviations that are already permitted for acupuncturists. Because our thinking and our best hope is that they're going to say that you can continue to use them, even though, you know, we wanted to be in the amendment for this bill, but they may say it's not necessary to continue using our titles. And then lastly, we're going to work toward an update on 457. Next slide. So let's talk quickly about Governor DeSantis's and the veto campaign for this bill. We have a very simple message for the governor, and this is what it is. You can do this by email or you can do this by telephone. But the message is, hello, I'm writing or calling today to ask the governor to veto Senate Bill 230. This bill unfairly restricts the use of professional titles. It restricts how small businesses can advertise their services. And Senate Bill 230 does not represent Florida's values. This is the opposite of freedom and not good for Florida. Please veto Senate Bill 230 and send it back to the Senate and the House to revise or reconsider next year. This is the message. We don't have to vary too far from this. You know, this is the core things that we need the governor, his office and staff to hear from us. It echoes what other healthcare professions like optometry are saying as well. And this also speaks to the governor's political agenda and his government philosophy. You know, in this instance, we want to appeal to those things because it reflects our concerns about this bill. Okay, this is the message. And every acupuncturist, student, college program, patient that's willing to help needs to contact the Governor DeSantis's office with that message. And they need to do it daily if possible, and if not, as frequently as they can. I'd say for about 14 days, starting 2 days ago. You know, we kicked off this campaign and we've already had a phenomenal, overwhelmingly phenomenal result. So in the end, what's important to understand, we've had feedback from the governor's office on this already. The governor's staff is counting every single call, every email, every contact to their office on this issue, not just for us, but for optometry and anybody else that's voicing a concern about the bill. And so when people think that, you know, their voice doesn't matter, or one more call won't help, or I don't want to bother my patients with this, you have to understand that this is the single strongest next best option for us. I just laid out, you know, what has happened and failed so far, but you can still see that we have a couple of bullet points in front of us. This is one of the key ones, because if the bill is vetoed, then we go back to square one. We don't have this issue of titling reform hanging over our heads. We still want to make changes and updates to our statute because there's definitely problems there. And we would have had more help from the legislature if our statute was written and constructed a little bit better than it is when it comes to titling. There are other things that are just fine in that language in 457, but there's no definition for professional titles. And that causes us a problem when we're looking for support. Next slide. So what more can acupuncturists in schools do? We're going to back up one. There we go. This link right here is the blue link that I put in the chat at the beginning of the presentation tonight. And so if you get the PDF version of this, you can find this link here, or you can copy it out of the chat. But this is going to open to a flyer that is something that you can use in your office, in your student clinic, with your patients. And there's a second link in it, obviously, for some more contact details for the governor's office. But this is access to what more can you do. Yes, you can personally call, but how do I engage my patients? How do I engage my colleagues? How do we make the most out of the opportunity we have in the next 14 days or so to influence the governor's decision to veto this bill? Okay. Last thing I'll say on this is that everyone who benefits from getting or giving acupuncture and oriental medicine care, they need to lend 2 minutes, little time, little effort to protect the use of the acupuncture physician title. And this is our best way to do it. Next slide. Let me take a pause for a second and see if there's some questions, because I wanted to talk a little bit about the bill, but I don't want to dive right into that, because I wanted to just highlight a couple of specifics, like what's actually in the bill and what are they trying to do. And in this way, let me just tackle anything that comes in the first part of our discussion in the town hall tonight. And maybe Ellen or Galena, you guys can help me with questions.
Well, do you want to, there's 3 I left in there. I've answered some. Do you want to pull them up, or do you?
I'm sorry, is this on the chat or on the Q&A?
No, Q&A. Click on Q&A and then you can, there's just 3 right now.
That sounds good. So here we go from John. So the things that are left, I still need to talk about, right? Speaking of United Front, the FOA is considering taking legal action. We partner with them, showing greater unified opposition to the bill. Again, John, I just want to say, if consulting with an attorney and asking them about legal action, they're usually, their first question is going to be, what other options do you have? If that's usually where the conversation starts. Lawyers know that, one, the process of a legal challenge is difficult, protracted, expensive, and the worst part of it is that it's uncertain. There's no way of knowing going in what the result is going to be. And I would say in this instance, you have to ask an attorney, say, on what grounds, what legal grounds are we going to use to sue the state of Florida? What are we going to claim that they've actually done that's illegal? And that's really difficult in this case, or in this situation, because the legislature is empowered by the Constitution to create or amend existing statutes and laws, and the governor is empowered to veto or sign them. And that's all that's going on here. It's easy for us to take it personally, to think that this is somehow, a target on acupuncture. But the truth of it is that the bill extends, and I'm going to describe for that in the next section. It just basically redefines what is the practice of medicine to include use of titles. And then they also made some specific, new specific language about what titles are authorized and how you can use them. But that in of itself is not illegal. That's just government at work. And so there's not a great legal remedy to a problem like this. The remedy is fixing our statute. And once that's done, or, the remedy can also be, delay. Find a way for this bill to go away with a governor veto, get a favorable declaratory statement from the Board of Acupuncture that implementation of the new law, it does not have any effect on how acupuncturists continue to use titles in the state, or there may be some hybrid language that allows for that. Okay. I hope that helps explain the position on the lawsuit. And again, I'm not saying not to do it. I'm not saying what people can and cannot do. I think that if somebody were to call me and say, how might I can talk to the attorneys, or what information might I want to know, I'll take that call offline and offer some thinking on that. But basically what the attorney really would have to tell me if I was making that case is, let's say, on what legal principle are you going to find that the state of Florida has acted inappropriately, and what is the remedy? Okay. And those answers would make all the difference. And they're going to say they haven't done anything wrong because they're operating within their statutory authority, and there's no upside because there's tort reform and there's no money to be had from the state on answers like this, and somebody's going to have to foot the bill.
David, I want to just suggest they have done something wrong. They made a mistake, but they did not do anything illegal. They made a mistake.
Okay, I'll accept that. I agree. What they've done, what they've done is, in our opinion, as a licensed acupuncturist opinion, is that it's not well thought out. And when given the opportunity to, extend protections to people that they were going to, just because somebody wants to create a new law, it doesn't mean that they can trample all over, existing authorities that are provided to acupuncturists. And if they don't want to make an amendment for it, then they have to make it perfectly clear that we qualify under some other exemption. And neither of those things has happened. So they're pushing that burden onto our profession to, prepare for changes and fight for, clarification when we shouldn't have to be, need clarification on this. Let me jump to Dr. Caparelli. And I wanted to know that, yes, I've had an opportunity to speak to the principals that sent a letter to Senator Garcia. And, we've had an opportunity to dialogue that, and hopefully, the discussion doesn't have to go any further. And I'm just saying that, it's one thing to communicate that there's consensus that, acupuncturists are unhappy, and it's quite another thing to actually file for a judge to certify a class to sue the government, and the state of Florida in particular. And so we're somewhere in the middle of that. And I've had my first opportunity to sort of address that. They asked me to address it and field questions regarding this tonight. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to do that. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at Stephen's question. This may be a little to ask, but modernization of the Practice Act, is it possible to add phlebotomy to the act with training? That is something that we could consider. I mean, there's several examples of where intravenous therapies are prohibited under our statute. And so it's not just simply introducing phlebotomy or phlebotomizing, but it would also mean, some consensus about us removing prohibitions that exist in the statute as well. So it's up for discussion, as is anything else. As we move through this process, anybody that's on the call tonight, they're more than welcome to send an email to david@fsoma.org. If there's something that's not in our statute that you would like to see there, I want everybody to feel welcome to share those thoughts with me, because the legislative committee is looking at it. We're working with our attorneys. We're also looking at what's available in other states, and we're trying to come up with, a strategy to support each and every element of this modernization that we want to do. It has to be well supported in order to be defended, and it has to be well supported to be adopted. So we'll work on that, Stephen.
And David, if
Yes.
I may intervene a little bit, I was at ASA conference this last weekend, and I personally spoke with Mackenzie from our accrediting body, and I personally spoke with Mina Larson. Profession is changing. States are evolving. New laws are popping out. So we as legislative committee at the FSOMA working on new language for updating our 457, which is way, way, way overdue. So there are some peculiarities with what can be used. Usually language shall be designed to meet necessary minimum standards of care. How much we can expand it, it's a different question, which depends on how polite legislators are to us, how much we can ask. And it's one of the reasons why we shall to follow the established procedures and be cooperative with legislators, and definitely not a lawsuit. After a lawsuit, nobody going to work with us and help us to achieve what we need. But we try to navigate what are the most appropriate ways to address the issue. Not every legislator is happy with that. And it has been a great achievement of our profession. All of you under David and Corinne Mixon, our lobbyist, leadership, that already House bill has not passed. Thank to all of you who participated in that. So we are playing by the rules, and even if 230 gets signed, we will work on opening 457, because to begin with, that was a glitch in our own practice law. Nowhere in 457 there is verbiage acupuncture physician. There is only abbreviation AP. Acupuncture physician is in the rules, but rules are not law. So we will open our statutes. Anyway, we will work on updating our law, and hopefully we can move forward with much more polite scope of practice and definitions to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Galina. Really, thanks for the thought. And thank you for your effort in being in DC this weekend. I know it was a great success and a good event. Let me touch on the question from, I'm sorry, let me make sure. From Cindy. Rep Mazzullo is my local district state representative here in Citrus County. So he and I have had an opportunity to meet several times, and we'll be meeting again probably over the summer. I've met him in the past to talk about this issue, not this year, but in previous years. We saw similar legislation elsewhere, and give me an opportunity to sort of come answer his questions and do what I can to help educate him on the background training and preparedness for acupuncture physicians here in Florida. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping around to me a little bit. So I see Christine, when it says, are they involved in the veto campaign? I'm not sure who they is, but acupuncturists certainly are full tilt. I'm hopeful that the colleges are using their clinic opportunity and patient encounters to educate them about, contacting the governor from various parts of the state where the schools are. That can be a tremendous resource. Individual patients that have been longtime supporters of the profession, they're usually more than willing to take 2 seconds to send an email or make a call, especially if we make it easy for them. Give them the details that they need. Take a tablet and just set it up with the, on the website there for the governor's email. They can just put in their comment, hit submit, and it's gone. It won't take but a second. And if you have a busy clinic with several dozen or more patients, have 100 contacts from that one office in one time. And if you see 3 patients a day, I'll take you plus those 3. Every single contact is a big thing. Are we partnering with optometry? This is Christina's question. We don't really have like a nexus, although we have common ground with optometrists. We have equal problems with the bill. Our lobbyists are familiar with and work with optometry team as well. And so I would say that we're on parallel tracks, in that, but we're with similar language and the same kind of, robust feedback from both professions. I hope that answers that question. It doesn't have to be more coordinated than that. We're all on the same page with a veto request. Can you please send an email with quick verbiage tonight? We can. Now, I'll make a PDF of the slides that Ellen is showing you tonight, and you'll see that verbiage as part of the presentation. And maybe I'll just peel it out and we'll send it as a separate bit so you can copy and paste that. Okay. Now, quickly, guys, I don't want to abuse anybody's schedule. It's 20 minutes to 8. So let me jump to some of the specifics on Senate Bill 230, because I get asked a lot, like, what is this thing about and how does it work and why are we having this problem? If you guys are okay with it, let me just jump to that. And I'm sorry, and sounds like a question for Ellen. Can we email from multiple email accounts? Must we include our name in each submission? I've been emailing as a practitioner. Well, you can use multiple email accounts if you want. I think, it's going to ask for the same kind of information and each time. And whether you submit it multiple times or you submit it from multiple accounts, it's gonna be tabulated as a contact. Okay. And however you can best do that, I'll leave it to you. Ellen, can I have you minimize? Oh no, that was me. I had the chat up on my screen. Okay. Here we're going to talk about Senate Bill 220 real quick. And this language is from the bill itself. Section 2, for the purposes of this section, this is very important to understand. Why was this created? Where did this come from? And what do they expect to do with it? The practice of medicine also includes attaching one's name either alone, in combination, or in connection with other words or other designations if used in an advertisement or in a manner that constitutes a misleading, deceptive, or fraudulent representation. So here, if you read that slowly, what they're saying is, for the purposes of this section, the practice of medicine is now going to mean something different than it did before they passed the bill. The practice of medicine typically includes acts like diagnosing, prescribing, surgery, referrals, things like this that are the practice of medicine, okay? In this instance, they're expanding the practice of medicine to include also attaching one's name alone in combination with other words or any of the following titles. And so what they're saying is use of a title in combination with your name now constitutes the practice of medicine if it includes doctor of medicine, MD, doctor of osteopathy, DO. Physician is among those words that is included here, along with like 30 other medical designations, you know, all of the specialties, all the things that you would expect in medicine. And so the practice of medicine is no longer just diagnosing, treating, prescribing, surgery. It's also the practice of medicine includes use of your professional title or designation. And so that's why that's one of the goals here is that the practice of medicine is going to be expanded to include use of titles. And the reason why they would do that, there are many reasons that you might pick from, but one of them is that if someone is found to be practicing medicine without a license, usually it's the Board of Medicine that is the agency of appeal. That's where the charges come from. Okay. And so, Stephen, I just want to comment quickly on OMD. You know, when we update titles in 457, we're going to have all the permutations and various versions of our own titling. Okay. So here, the word physician was picked up in this prohibited language. And to continue using the word physician as part of your professional title, if this bill is to be enacted, it can be construed as the practice of medicine. And if you're not licensed under medicine, you don't have an exemption provided by one of the amendments, then maybe you're not going to be able to use that term anymore. So this is what caught our attention. And this is why we've been working so hard to make sure that there's no prohibition on titles that we've been using as a profession for many years. Okay. I hope that helps really identify where is it in this bill that this is a problem. Next slide. Thanks, Ellen. The bill also includes new definitions for a handful of things, including advertisement, false and misleading advertising. And I've been asked several times, so I thought I'd just include it here in the slide. When people have been asking me, well, if it says I can't advertise, does that mean my sign? Or if I says I can't advertise, does that mean my business cards or my website? And so the definition of advertisement here in the new legislation means any printed, electronic, or oral statement that is communicated or disseminated to the general public that is intended to encourage a person to use a practitioner's professional services or to promote those services or the practitioner in general. Okay. And I'll answer your questions on doctor in 2 seconds. I have it all included here. Lastly, advertisement is for commercial purposes, name of the practitioner in connection with the practice and blah, blah, blah. So I hope that's clear. It means any printed, electronic, or oral statement that's used to encourage a person to use your professional services. That is the definition of advertisement. Next slide. They also have a new definition for what is misleading, deceptive, or fraudulent representation. And so this means any information that misrepresents, falsely describes the practitioner's profession, skills, training, expertise, educational degree, board certification, or licensure. Okay, I highlighted educational degree for obvious reasons in the next couple slides. So this is what they're saying. You can't use advertising in a false and misleading way. Back up for me one more. Good, next slide. Okay, profession, I'll take a second on this. Profession is also defined here. This term, you know, it's defined, I'm sorry, in the Senate Bill 230. It's saying this term does not include a practitioner's license or educational degree. And the reason I brought this up is because oftentimes when I talk to colleagues, they will identify themselves saying like, I'm a doctor of Oriental medicine. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Oriental medicine. That is not your professional. That's not the profession. The profession is defined in 457-102. And the profession is one of acupuncturist. An acupuncturist means a person licensed under this chapter to practice acupuncture as a primary healthcare provider. That is everybody under 457 is in the profession of acupuncture. When you say, I'm a doctor of Oriental medicine, I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Oriental medicine, that is your professional title, not to be confused with your profession. They are two separate things. You're an acupuncturist based on your training and licensure in Florida, and then what your professional title is and how you use and advertise with that is based on something other than your professional title. And so I just remind everybody of that, because sometimes it's easy for us to get swept up in using the title as the profession. And for people that regulate or legislators who craft this language, they're quite aware of that. You know, all of us, the only definition in 457 for our profession is acupuncturist, period. Okay, so as a profession, that's what everybody is. What your professional title is based on other things. Next slide. I included here for you quickly, current use of professional titles, designations, and abbreviations. This is what's accepted under Florida, and I wanted to include it. There's a couple things to be mindful of here. The first thing I put in is disciplinary actions. In 457, 109, it includes that you are prohibited from using false, deceptive, or misleading advertising. And I just described for you what that was a minute ago. It includes, you know, a whole host of things, including your educational degree. Okay. And so on one hand, we have all of these, you know, designations for the only place in 457 where there's any kind of reference to a title is here in 457-116 under prohibited acts. And what it basically says there is that it's unlawful for somebody who is not licensed under 457 to use the title acupuncturist, certified acupuncturist, or to use letters like LAC, APDOM. That's what it says in 457. Okay. And so what you want to be mindful of is that under the rule that the Board of Acupuncture created in 2006, here, 64B9, it says advertising by persons licensed is permitted so long as the information disseminated is in no way false, deceptive, or misleading. Okay? And so you want to just ask yourself, is there anything about the way I represent my professional title, my education credentials, my abbreviations, designations, that is in some way false, deceptive, or misleading? Okay? Because here in 60, further down in the Advertising Act, is where the Board of Acupuncture created the professional titles for the profession back in 2006. It clarified that we could use LAC, RAC, AP, DOM. It includes acupuncture physician and doctor of Oriental medicine. Now, what's important to understand is that the Board of Medicine cannot create a rule that allows us to break the law in some other way. And so either your professional title, designation, and abbreviations are not misleading, not false, not deceptive, okay, or they are. And so they created these titles here, but you can only use them to the extent that they are accurate and not misleading. All right, this is I don't want to go round and round on it, but a lot of times the argument I have with, you know, when our colleagues are trying to understand this is they're saying, look, it says right there, I can use Doctor of Oriental Medicine. Well, you can, provided that there's nothing else about your background, education, and training that doesn't meet that qualification. In other words, if you don't have a doctorate, I don't know under, you know, what thinking we're going to say that use of that is not misleading in some way. Okay. And so for everybody who has earned their doctorate, they can use any of these titles they want. If you have not, and you have a master's, as I do, then you want to advertise as a licensed acupuncturist with a master's. Okay. And so I'm hopeful that this clarifies that question for you. The two things cannot be true at the same time. It's either accurate and reflects your highest education, or it's inaccurate and it's misleading and you can't use it. And so I'll leave it to everybody to decide how best to use that going forward. Separately, the term acupuncture physician is untethered historically from your degree, whether it's a professional title that applies to all licensed acupuncturists in the state. And so that may or may not continue to be the case, but it's historically been that case. And certainly saying I'm an acupuncture physician, with a master's is different than saying I'm a doctor with a master's. Okay, there is a distinction there. There is a difference. Next slide. Things that we wanted to look at real quick. I was asked a second ago, and I only have 2 more slides. We're taking the rest of your questions. Is, what things are we looking at for 457? And this is a project that's probably nearly a year old. It seems like we got thrust into this conversation because of the titling changes with this new bill, but FSOMA has been contemplating ways that we can modernize the language in 457 because we see a lot of the challenges that are presented to the profession because of some of the gaps in the way that things are defined in our statute. There are areas of practice that people want to work in, and we want to make sure that there's as little obstruction or a little impediment as possible to practicing based on our education and training. We want to make sure that the statute is modernized to reflect all of the many things that we're have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do in our practice. I just reflect again, somebody was asking me about the DACM. All professional titles that are possibly available to based on educational degrees that are awarded in our specialty will be included in any prospective language that we come up with. We're going to find a way to describe that without having to list every single possible permutation of DAOM, DOM, DACM, and all this, because we could just say, if you're awarded a doctorate in that specialty, you can use the corresponding designations and abbreviations that go with that, period. And that would cover everybody. So I don't want anybody listening to feel like we have to come up with an exhaustive list of 50 different ways we do that, because there's a simpler, broader way to do that to make sure that not only the degrees that are being awarded today, but those degrees as they change in the course of a decade or more, you don't want to have to go back and redo the statute every time there's a new doctoral degree that's being awarded. So we're going to craft that language in a way that's a real umbrella for the entire, the full spectrum of doctorate degrees that are awarded in our specialty, okay? Let me talk about this real quick. I just have a question from somebody about DOH as title of AP on our license. And I've looked at this carefully. I too have a license. When I look at it, it says AP 3005. But AP is not a title. It's an initial at best, maybe. Okay. And so, and it's undefined. It's undefined in rule. It's not expressly defined in the rule that I just showed you from 64B1. And if we look at AP and other things that it might stand for, that could be acupuncture practitioner, acupuncture provider. I tend to think, or acupuncture physician. I don't want to say that it doesn't necessarily, but it's making an assumption to say that it does, because it's not expressly defined or prescribed in that anywhere in that way. Not by the Department of Health, not by the Board of Acupuncture. I've tried to get additional input on that, but it's something that seems to be lost to the ages because it's been around for a long time. But we want to make sure that titling is expressly whatever is going to be allowed is perfectly clear, both in statute and in rule. And Angel, thanks for your question. When it says nobody knows, I imagine somebody knows. We haven't got the answer from the person who knows yet. But the truth of it is that because AP sits on your license, gives you no authority to use AP or to interpret what AP means or any of those things as a licensee. We are granted a license and all of the privileges that come with that from the Department of Health. And so a lot of times we want to project, our system of belief and, all of the hard work we've done and all of the rights that we have. But you have to remember every day when you walk into your office, that license that's hanging on your wall is no different than the license in your wallet that allows you to operate your car on a public way. There are rules that you have to abide by with turning right on red, stopping at red lights, not drinking and driving, and there's lots of rules that we have to abide by under our license from the Department of Health. And so that's the discussion we're having. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't answer these questions. So quickly, we're looking at definitions and terms being considered. One is that there's no definition for the practice of acupuncture in our Practice Act. That would be helpful. Titles, designations, and abbreviations. Obviously, we just spent an hour talking about that. Acupuncture assistant is something that we're looking at. That's examples from other states. Prescribing authority and a formulary for AIT would be very helpful because there's too much confusion around what can and cannot be injected and what authority do we have to order and prescribe and dispense those products. Last, we're looking at a update for Oriental medicine, and the conversation right now is replacing that with East Asian. We're doing that for a couple of reasons: to be consistent with federal standards for use of Oriental in public documents. And then lastly, we're looking at supervision permissions for direct and general supervision for acupuncturists to provide in their own offices for other providers. For example, a licensed massage therapist or something, to have direct or general supervision for another provider would be helpful for insurance billing as well as the smooth operation of our offices. Okay, next slide. Statutory update, we keep throwing around a number. We're looking to increase our budget for the legislative fundraising to $125,000. Right now we spend about 50, and that's been this case for about the last 15 years. But in order to do a legislative update is going to require a lot more funding. Campaign funding for 2 key legislative sponsors for the acupuncture bill, as well as about 5 additional key legislators to help support the bill in various committees and help carry our message. Statewide legislative education program. Every state legislature needs multiple visits and meetings with an acupuncturist. I can't state that clearly enough. If you don't make contact with a local legislator, sit down face to face, say, hey, my name is David. I own a business 3 blocks down the street. I treat an average of 50 of your constituents every week for the last 12 years. We get consistent positive results that reduce healthcare costs, improve patients' outcomes. This is my background in training. I need your support to help me with modernizing our Practice Act so that we can stay in business and continue to serve this community. That won't take 5 minutes. And they won't want to give you more than 5 minutes, but you need to make time to have that conversation. FSOMA is going to give you the legislative kit that you need to leave with them so they have information about what we're doing. But if you cannot make time or encourage patients, students, somebody to shake hands, go look them in the eye, tell them that you're relevant, then we don't exist. They have no reference. They've never been in your office. They might not know anybody that's ever been in your office, and we're a distant galaxy. You need to put a human face on this in your community with the person who's going to say yay or nay to the future of your profession. And we need to do this now. We don't have like 3 years. We could take forever to do it, but instead of costing $125,000, it's going to cost $500,000, everybody. You're going to keep paying and paying and paying. So I beg you, there's only 160 people elected in this state that make these decisions. Okay. There's 120 of them in the House and there's 40 of them in the Senate. There's 2,600 plus acupuncturists in the state. That means there's 16 acupuncturists for every 1 legislator. Okay. I think we can do this. We just need to knock on doors and get out there and do it. Okay. FSOMA cannot do this without your commitment and without your action. All right. I have one I need Ellen to kind of back up for me because there was a slide that I wanted to give you guys on do's and don'ts. Keep going back, keep going, keep going, keep going. I think we skipped it near the beginning of this. Keep going, keep going. One more, keep going, keep going, keep going. Here we go. I'm sorry. Go forward, Ellen. That one right there. Okay. I skipped over this because I thought I said everything I needed to on it. But what I wanted to share with everybody, okay, is that we need to review what the limited implications of this bill are. If the bill actually becomes law, I need everybody to be mindful of this. Use of doctor, DR, doctor of, whatever you are, DAOM, DACM, any permutation of that you can possibly think of. Those are all perfectly fine. They are available to anybody who has a doctoral degree. That is not going to change with this new law. Okay? The only thing that's important here is that if you use Dr. just John Josephine Smith, right? It's important that you put your specialty at the end of your name. You can't just leave it Dr. Josephine Smith. You got to put comma, DAOM, DACM, whatever there's going to be on the back of that, because it needs to sort of correspond with the specialty of your doctorate. They've made that kind of clear in the language of this bill. They don't want us to use that DR in front of your name loosely because it can be misleading and that it's commonly thought of as being a medical doctor. They should also put MD at the back of their name too. But, we're the ones that need to sort of step up our game a little bit here. In red, doctor, doctor of, and initials are not available without a doctoral degree. That doesn't change either. The profession has used it for many years and there hasn't been a lot of pushback on it. But now this new legislation is focused very specifically on false, misleading, deceptive, unlawful, fraudulent use of titles in advertising. So if you're somebody that does not have a doctoral degree, you want to be very circumspect about putting doctor in front of your name or putting an alphabet soup behind your name that includes doctorish titles. Because somebody is going to, if it was under greater scrutiny, whether it was the Board of Medicine or the Board of Acupuncture, they may be drilling down on that as being false or misleading. Okay. Licensed acupuncturists and use of MSOM, they're still available. There's no changes. Acupuncture physician, depending on how this ball lands, may be prohibited. There may be some changes to that. And then we have our opportunity to go back and see if we can include it, if necessary, under 457, okay? And then I think I included a couple references here for you on this false and deceptive part. But I covered that really clearly. But I keep getting asked many, many times over, can I use my title? Can I use my title? Does this rule change my title? It only changes it in these ways, okay? Ellen, do me a favor. Let's take me to the end of the presentation.
I want to say real quickly, there are schools that have been saying to their students who are getting a master's that they can use doctor. And unfortunately, people have gotten away with it. Not unfortunately, but people have done it, used it, not had any trouble. But the way this law is written and the clarity of it and the fact that they're going to probably be going out to hunt people down, it becomes very problematic.
Yeah. And so do me a favor, click on the one with the blue screen with the blue thing in the middle. This is for Q&A. And then lastly, I do want to take, if I missed questions, let me pop open the chat and I apologize.
There are a bunch in the Q&A, David, not the chat, the Q&A.
Let me get to the Q&A. Okay, here we go. Woo. Can we use doctor as long as we have our credentials after? Yes. Catherine Thomas, just wonder if it would be different for us. No, this is the thing. People who have earned a doctoral degree, your privileges around titling are protected by your degree. And so you can use those. That wasn't really part of, early on, there was an attempt to try to include doctor and DR with some of these prohibitions, but that gets stamped out of this bill very early on. There was tremendous pushback in that area. So this is not a question. The only thing we're worried about is acupuncture physician and whether we can continue to use it. It's been part of our our tradition and use for more than 25 years. And like our lobbyists and attorneys say, there's no reason for us to give it up just because somebody is creating bad new legislation. We have every right to fight to keep what's ours. There's no, just because they have an idea about how they want to handle use of titles and advertising doesn't mean we have to give up what we've been doing. And so it's worth fighting for. We may have to, preserve it in a different way, but we'll fight. If they're willing to take legal action, should we look to them for a precedent with optometry? I think the short answer is yes. If optometry wants to file a lawsuit against the governor or the legislation, they would have my full attention, and I'd be willing to watch that very closely. Just to clarify, BOA doesn't clarify. If the BOA doesn't clarify, we cannot continue to use initials AP. So the initials AP are fine, okay? Because do yourself a favor and just put, this is for Sarah, parentheses around AP, okay? AP is fine. Use of the word, because that's not included in the prohibited language in the bill. Use of the word physician is prohibited. And so if you have AP on your door, or you have AP on your business card, or you have AP, advertised in some other way, I would say if the board does not clarify use of acupuncture physician, then you might want to come up with another term or phrase or designation for what that title is. And if somebody says, well, what does AP stand for? You can say acupuncture practitioner, or you can say acupuncture provider. Okay. It's just that if the BOA doesn't give us a green light on continued use of physician, then we're going to have to come up with an alternative term to use with acupuncture. Okay. Until we can get it included in 457, because that would make it expressly allowed. Joanne, for those of the masters that need to revamp cards, letterhead and whatnot, if so, when does this need to be done? So if you have doctor included in your titling in this way and you feel like it's time to make a change, I would say anytime prior to the effective date. Well, I would say sooner the better, because frankly, it's something that at any given time between when you were licensed and right now while we're speaking, you could be the subject of discipline for doing that. Not necessarily under this new rule, but under existing language and prohibitions, both in 457 as well as under 456. And I know it's been a common practice, but it could have been subject to discipline. But if you're going to say, when is my absolute deadline? That would be July 1st. If this is signed into law, its effective date is July 1st this year. Okay, Joanne? Joalis, so when will we know if the bill is finalized in true impact? Because it sounds like we can't use the title, but okay, I would agree. So there is a couple things, on my timeline that I gave you earlier. One, if the governor vetoes the bill prior to July 1st, then this is not a huge concern for us in terms of its impact. If it's signed into law, then in the Board of Acupuncture does not act prior to July 1st, then that would be your deadline for making these changes. Okay, good. Thank you, Galina. Just wondering. I just wonder why it would be so different. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just reading through the questions. And if I don't answer a question that you have for any reason, email me at david@fsoma.org and I'll get to them separately. The concern is with PTs.
David, would it be useful to get a group up to visit the governor's office?
I'll ask Corinne in the morning.
Okay.
Because she has a meeting scheduled with one of his staff. And so let me ask her if she wants to have, people assist with her. Okay.
Okay.
Do you foresee this happening to us? I'm trying to understand T's question. Is concern we end up like PTs in need in order to do our job? Oh, so you're wondering if we're going to need a prescription for continued care. PTs have 30 days to see somebody without supervision from an MD. It's possible, and not necessarily because of anything that we're seeing right now, but I think, Galina's point of being unified, acting within the rules, coming up with a cogent way to deal with problems as they come to us. The appropriate response for a titling dispute is to open the statute and make the change there, because then it makes it clear for everybody. Okay, so I don't necessarily see us losing our autonomy as practitioners, but nothing can be ruled out. If we start making adversaries and they start taking a closer look at who are these people, where do they get their authority, what does that board look like, how many consumer advocates does it have, how well balanced is it, and have some outside influences, or the executive branch, decide they want to have greater influence over what happens in our profession, they can do that. The board is in the governor's, he appoints the board members for our licensing board. And this is all, managed very closely by the Department of Health. And so when we have a remedy that's right in front of us to just, do our own due diligence, make the changes we need to make, and, get in line in lockstep with everybody else, then that's our marching orders. And if we decide that we want to come up with some alternative way of doing it, then we're going to get alternative results. I'm sorry. I'm following, and I might be at the end of the Q&A.
Yeah, there's
I think the discussion about chiropractors is Kathy and Christine have it right, is that included in definitions under Chapter 460, when you open the Practice Act for chiropractors, it includes their definition for professional title, chiropractic physician. It's also included in the Social Security Act under that 1382 R1, under the Social Security Act, where they define physicians. They've long time had domain over that professional title, and so they get the privileges to go with that. And one of those privileges is not having the fight that we're having right now. Okay, so I hope we were able to provide some answers. We didn't go crazy on the time. It's only 8:15 now with our full presentation and questions. Does it feel like there's anything that's lingering out there that you have a burning concern or question about that did not get asked or answered already?
I wanted to talk for just a second. I saw, and I don't think I answered it, about Blue Cross has nationally said that we can't bill for E&M codes. It's not because of this statute. It's right. Something else going on. It may be related. There may be efforts by medical doctors behind the scenes or something to do that. But getting into Medicare will certainly only help that as a provider.
Right. And I think it's because, what Medicare is approved is, acupuncture services for chronic low back pain of a certain type. It's also billed as, now the word's going to run from my head. It's billed as I would say adjunct, but that's not the right word. It's like it's part of an ongoing service by their primary care provider. In other words, you go to the primary care provider and he does it for a regular visit. He runs through, or she runs through your health and history and updates you, and you identify that you have low back pain. I identify it as chronic low back pain. The medical doctor that is your primary care provider is managing all of you, and including your back pain. And if they make a referral for use for acupuncture to treat that, they're only approving the procedure code for the service, the act of providing that care. And that the E&M, the evaluation and management component of the billing, rests with the billing provider. Okay, so what they're saying is we're not going to pay twice for evaluation and management on this patient. We're already paying the MD to make that E&M decision making, and he's referring them for procedural care. It's the same reason why PTs don't get paid an E&M code. They get paid on procedure codes only.
So let me, guys, summarize all what we went through today. David, thank you so much preparing such a great presentation and giving all of the details. So the use of doctorate title. Those of you who do have a doctorate degree are entitled of use of the title doctor, an abbreviation of DR in front of your name, as long as you do provide the information to your patients or other healthcare providers that you are a doctor of Oriental medicine or any other soup of abbreviations what we have. That is the most important. And if you use doctor, for example, Galina Rufiner, I must have at the end of my name 3 letters of DOM, at least how it's defined in Florida right now, or whatever doctorate title you received from your college. So that's one of the things. It's not affected whatsoever. The title acupuncture physician never was defined in our statutes. In our statutes, we're only abbreviation AP. Therefore, it's a gray area and subject for interpretation. In the interim, until July 1st, we can continue using acupuncture physician.
Yep.
After July 1st, it depends. We'll decide to sign it in the law or not. Please stay tuned. We will be updating you in all possible means. For right now, we need your big effort. Please keep calling. Please keep emailing. If you go on the FSOMA website, right immediately on the first page, there are updates. They're posted essentially daily. David and our lobbyist, Corinne Mixon, do an immense job. They meet in the 10 p.m. It's just outstanding how great David's job and Corinne's job is. So I would love for you all guys to say thanks to David. Ellen and Natalia working horrendously to make sure that all information delivered to you, Natalia on social media, Ellen on emails, and answering your questions, calls, and so forth. So please stay tuned on Acupuncture Physician. We would love to have your participation in the FSOMA. We need you, please. Here is just a handful of us. We all volunteers. If you are interested to participate, please email Ellen. We would love to see you as our committee members. We have 13 different committees. We are starving for members, volunteers to do the job. We're looking for some licensed acupuncturists who bills insurance for our insurance committee because so much going on with insurance right now. It's not dependent on acupuncture physician title whatsoever. It's a national process. And in majority of the cases, this is an attempt to save the money for insurance companies, has absolutely nothing to do with our title. Plus, Florida has been fortunate to have a physician title. But in all reality, majority of the rest of the country has a licensed acupuncturist or registered acupuncturist title. So we are fighting. The best way for us to preserve our profession, we cannot fight with the entire world. We will lose anyway, because everybody now wants acupuncture procedure in their scope of practice. Lawsuits and everything else is a losing proposition. It's defense. In defense, you're not going to win. We need an offense. We need all of us go to legislators in Florida. We need all of us keep working with legislators in DC. We absolutely must achieve a designation of the provider under Social Security Act. The designation of the provider under Social Security Act offers us jobs. That's the most important, jobs, employment. Enrollment in our schools is shrinking. In the entire country right now is about 6,000 students. We need to support our schools. Therefore, we need employment. It's absolutely irrelevant how much Medicare pays. Nobody obligates you to have 100% Medicare-based practice at all, but we need employment. That is a key message. So please work with us, please support. We need to raise money. If we go on the FSOMA.org website, right immediately on the first page under our legislative updates, we have buttons donate. If you don't have time to participate in legislative work, you don't think that it's your job, please donate. If you know someone who is not a FSOMA member, please encourage them to join. Out of entire almost 3,000 professionals, we have about 20% of members. If we don't have people who work on the FSOMA, who go advocate, do other, for example, contact insurances, work with us, and so forth, we need the money. Why chiropractors are able to achieve what they're able to achieve. 95% of chiropractors are members of their professional association. And I am so sorry, it's how it works. Or you do the work, or you pay for the work done. We must to open our practice law. We must to gather the money. Please participate.
Galina, thanks. You touched on all the important things that I skipped over. This is the coming together that we really, really need. Ellen, if you can go to the last slide, I just want to recognize a couple people. Just quickly, I just want to let everybody know how appreciative we are. And Galina said it, but to the FSOMA membership and their robust support, it's tremendous. To Ellen and the communications director, Natalia, they're working, I'd say, nearly round the clock the last 3 months, trying to keep our messaging on point. I want to thank the board leadership and the directors. Everybody has a role to play, and their tremendous support that I get. Everybody should know that we have great legal representation with Gabe Warren, as well as our lobbyists, Corinne and Angela, have worked very hard this year to protect the profession and take this fight to the legislature in the strongest way we can. And lastly, I have a special thanks to Dr. Buck Campbell and April Brader, who took a lot of time this week to sit and talk to me and listen to our thoughts back and forth on the position and value of a class action. And so we're going to continue our dialogue with them. I hope that we'll have more conversation in the coming days or weeks, but I'm always grateful for other people's input into the process, and especially if they're passionate. I'll take their passion any day, even if it means we don't agree on something. But I love to hear somebody that's passionate and frustrated and willing to do something about it. And so Galina said, if you don't have time to sit down and participate in the committee, your money is really required, because we have big bills to pay in order to protect and move the profession forward. So I don't care if it's $50 or $500. If you do $5 on a monthly recurring, that would be a tremendous value to the profession. Anything more that you can do would be great. Sometimes I look at those things like a matching thing, like I'll contribute $1 for every patient I see during a week. And you just come up with something in your own mind that makes sense. You don't have to be overwhelmed with trying to come up with some big number. But you'd be surprised. You see 30 patients a week, it's $120 a month. Those dollars add up quick, and the profession would really benefit from having it in our pack. And Galina described ways that you can contribute to that. So I'm going to sign off and thank everybody for their attention and their willingness to join us after hours for an update. And I welcome, like I said, any questions unanswered or things that come to mind. Feel free to use David at FSOMA.org, or share it with the office. Okay. Thank you, Galena. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, David, very
Well,
much.
I did put talking points in the chat, so just scroll up a few. I'm probably not going to email them out tonight,
Yep.
but I did get them in the chat. So
I'll convert that to a PDF and send it so you can email that, and maybe I'll carve out that section where I put the talking points on that screen as a separate little part of that email communication you could send. Okay.
okay.
Thanks, Ellen. Thank you,
All right.
Galena.
Thank you.
Everybody, I see we still get about 20 people. As long as there's no questions, I'm going to move on. Okay.
Thank you,
Remember-
guys. Thank you all.
Thank you, Galena. Thanks, Ellen. Good night to
All right.
everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.